Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Podcast. I'm Graham Richmond, and this is your wiretaps for Monday, March 14th, 2022. I'm joined by Alex Brown from Cornwall, England. Alex, how are things going?
Very good, thank you, Graham, despite the tragedies occurring around the world.
Yeah, I guess, it's a strange juxtaposition where spring is in the air, at least here in Paris. It's starting to feel a bit spring-like, and, COVID is receding into the rear view a bit. I mean, life is kind of going back to normal, but then it's all with the, the backdrop of everything that's happening in Ukraine. So it's just a challenging time, but yeah.
Is COVID disappearing in the rear view, or we just don't report on it anymore?
I think we're sick of it.
Other stuff.
I don't know. That's a good question. I think the numbers are going down, and I think we've just reached a state where it's endemic instead of But yeah, this is it's just crazy times. But what about? I know last week was the beginning of some crazy times on the admissions front, right? We had Tepper and maybe INSEAD giving out some decisions, but tell me what's happening and what's on the horizon, because now we're getting into it, right?
Yeah, Tepper would be the first of the US-based sort of big schools releasing decisions. They did that at the back end of last week, so that was very exciting. So congratulations, folks that heard from CMU Tepper. This upcoming week, today should be Keenan Flagler. We've got Duke, Darden, Oxford Side, Tuck, Emory, Ross, IESE amongst the schools that will be reporting round two decisions this week. So we're sort of like, at the front end of what we call decision weeks, and the following weeks some of the bigger guns will be rolling decisions out. But yeah, lots of activity right now, and best of luck to everyone waiting to hear from these programs.
Yeah, it's exciting. We'll see, how the chips fall. I want to say, again, I continue to have conversations with admissions directors and, try to keep my finger on the pulse. And I think there are going to be a lot of acceptances off the wait list from round one, as well as pretty good rates of admission in round two, just given what I've heard about, application volume. So I think people are hopefully, fingers crossed, people get some good news, some scholarship dollars to go with it. We will see, but it's all to come. Stay tuned. We'll try to document this. And Alex, I don't know if you want to get back on Clubhouse at some point, but we might want to do that. Maybe, I don't know what week you're thinking of, but maybe that week where we've got a lot of the M7 schools delivering decisions. I guess we can, put our heads together and figure that piece out.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So over on the website, we've had a couple more Real Humans alumni pieces. We profiled a woman named Courtney Edmonds who works at McKinsey and graduated from Stern back in 2020. She is originally from New York and had a pretty fascinating background. She worked in translation. I believe she's maybe fluent in, I want to say, Chinese and Japanese. And she literally went from like a translation or interpreter type work into business school and then out the other end to consulting. So pretty impressive. People always make these kind of career pivots out of business school, but I love to see them in play. And, we had another woman. Her name is Natalia Borges, and she is from Brazil and works at Microsoft. And she's a Duke Fuqua graduate from class of 21. And she went from banking. I think she was in banking for more than 5 years prior to business school, now into tech. So we see these transitions over and over again, but just really cool to read about them. And I thought it was nice that we had a couple of women that we profiled last week, given that International Women's Day was last week too. So I'm going to credit Lauren, our editor-in-chief, for kind of engineering that, I'm hoping. Or maybe it was just a coincidence. We just have a lot of great women to profile, but very cool stuff.
No, fantastic. And congratulations to those that were profiled too. They sound like really fascinating individuals.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed reading those. We also did a Real Humans MBA students where we had Stanford GSB. I think there were 7 students profiled in that piece. So if you're interested in Stanford, read those profiles. You'll learn a lot about, these candidates' journey to Stanford and what the first year's been like there. So a lot of fun there. And then the other thing, we continue to roll out these employment or kind of career placement outcomes pieces. And there were 2 that we did last week. One was about understanding the percentage of students who are seeking employment and landing jobs at these top programs. So I'll just stop there on that one. Alex, did you have any thoughts on that? I mean, that's kind of sounds like a basic thing, but it was kind of revealing to look at.
Yeah, I mean, if, as Elliot sort of pointed out, the author of the piece, I mean, you go to Stanford And there's actually a significant portion of folks as classmates that aren't recruiting anywhere.
Yeah.
Versus, several other programs at the other end of the spectrum where everybody's there basically recruiting and so forth. And that will affect the dynamic of the class profile or the class experience, I think. When you've got, I'm assuming at Stanford, you've got a good portion of folks that are basically looking at entrepreneurial opportunities and so forth, or having their own business, their own startup.
Yeah.
So that reveals that we will be doing a piece on entrepreneurship here, I think, in the following week. So that should be confirmed, I think, in that piece.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that strikes me is that schools always sort of throw out these numbers about, this percent of the class went to consulting and banking or whatever it might be, and this percent have jobs, et cetera. But all those percentages are really based on the number of candidates in the class who are actually looking for work. And so when you look at a place like Stanford, it turns out that only, I think it's less than, right around 60% are looking for jobs and finding them and going off and, following the kind of regular recruitment process. Whereas there's this big chunk, like you say, who are, maybe they're going off to start companies. I think some of them might be sponsored, so they don't count either. So it's important to keep all this stuff in mind. There's another little slice that are just continuing with other education. So maybe they're in a joint degree program, and Stanford has a number of those, right? So in any event, it's just interesting to see. And then the contrast would be, I think it was Darden, it's more like almost 90% of the students are looking for employment and finding jobs and following that regular recruitment process. So yeah, definitely has an impact on the culture of the school and stuff that's worth digging into when you're considering where to apply. The other one, though, that we did was finance. And I know you've been kind of waiting for this one because it really is fascinating. But we did a whole piece on finance placements. And again, we tried to pull back the veil on, just the basic number that schools give, which is, 20% of our grads went into finance or financial services. And we got into the real nitty gritty of, what percent of that is banking versus, I can't remember the other categories. What is it? VC, private equity, investment management. There's maybe another category or two even that I'm forgetting, but it was fascinating to see. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one.
Yeah, this is the first piece that clearly distinguishes the order of programs, from the very top through that sort of top 16, top 20 that we focus on. And it's clearly illustrated in the types of employment that top-tier candidates are really seeking. So if it was a consulting piece, it'd be looking at the MBB employment ratios and so forth. But in banking, it's looking at the buy side versus sell side.
Yeah.
And if you look on the buy side, you're focusing on private equity, venture capital, and so forth. You will see at the very top of the list is Harvard and Stanford. Just behind them is Wharton. Just behind Wharton will be the remainder of the M7, and just behind that will be the next tier, and so on and so. It's very crystal clear that this reflects the what we would consider the tiering system of the rankings of the program. So it's very clear. And what it means to me, Graham, is when is it important to really go to the best program that you can get into is when you're targeting those sort of elite career opportunities,
right,
i.e. buy side and MBB.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I know that the MBB piece or the consulting piece, we're going to break that stuff down. I think it's coming out either, today when this podcast airs or maybe, Wednesday of this week. So stay tuned on that front because that's in the works. I've seen a draft of it and it's ready to go. So very cool stuff.
Unfortunately on the MBB side, and I'll just say this out front, not all programs are revealing that data
right
in their employment reports. I'm hoping what we do, Graham, in subsequent reports is do a more of a deeper dive piece on MBB by exploring LinkedIn profiles and so on and so forth, which is possible to do now with that sort of additional research. So
I'm hoping that we actually, inspire some of these schools to, just report more stuff, right? Because I think that they're going to see, some of their peers are reporting it and some are not. And so, I think it'd be good to get more granular. So hopefully we'll raise awareness. We will see.
Yes. Yeah.
Other stuff going on. Last week we aired a special episode of the podcast about online MBA programs, which we don't really talk much about as a rule here. We tend to focus on full-time, in-person. But, with the pandemic and just the advent of more and more online programs being offered by top 25 MBA programs that are out there, brick and mortar schools. We talked a little bit a few weeks ago about that online MBA ranking where you have, Tepper and Kelly and I guess USC, Foster, some of the, brand names that we know about because they're top 20 traditional MBAs. They're in the online space. And so I had a special guest on, a professor named Carolyn Gerner, who teaches at Indiana Kelley. And I just asked her to kind of walk through, how would you go about vetting a program? And, despite being from Kelley, which, ranks number one every year, it seems, but she was really good about just laying it out and talking more generally about all these different ways you might assess online. So tune into that one if you have ever contemplated an online MBA. And then the other one that's forthcoming is I recorded an episode about women in business and particularly women in business school and really like the path to the C-suite for women. And I would have loved to have had it ready for International Women's Day last week, but we just couldn't get the timing together. But it's coming soon. And, one of the facts that I mentioned to you before we came on air, Alex, is that in the U.S. kind of Fortune 500, there are obviously 500 companies and there are only 31 of those companies that have a woman at the helm in the CEO role. And, so we kind of started with that as the kind of point of discussion with these guests that I had on the show, both of whom are women and have MBAs, and just really interesting conversation about how do we get kind of move the meter there, and also the numbers in the business schools, like what, how many schools are actually up above the 40% threshold in terms of female representation in the class and stuff. So stay tuned for that. That was a really interesting conversation.
No, very good, very good. You talk about the small number of women that are CEOs. I wonder what's the percent of women that are on boards.
Yeah, it's probably similar, but I don't know.
Well, I don't know that because I'm sure I recently read a report that was looking at FTSE 100 or whatever that acronym is. Mm-hmm. So UK based, and I think the percent of women on boards is actually quite high, but it's it's sort of as a result of non-exec board members versus the CEO role or something like that.
And I do know that there's been efforts made there. I mean, I know, people are increasingly aware of this stuff. And when I see boards nominating new members and things, it seems like there's some movement there.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things was that the 31 women who are CEOs of these Fortune 500 companies, more than half, or at least half of them had MBAs. So I think that's a good sign as well in terms of the value of the degree and the network it provides and so on.
Yeah.
So in any event, stay tuned for that one. Other than that, I don't have anything. We haven't gotten any mail, no reviews of the podcast.
That's good, Graham. Let's kick on. We're running out of time.
All right. So, so let's move on then, and we'll get into our candidates for this week, and let's talk about Wiretap's candidate number 1. So this is an ApplyWire entry that we received from a candidate who has 13 schools on the target list. And those schools are Boston College, Columbia, Dartmouth, Duke, Georgetown, Harvard, LBS, MIT, NYU, Rice, UVA, Vanderbilt, and Yale. And this is a military officer who's going to be applying next fall to start the following fall. And, for post-MBA career, it's a little bit all over the map. They cite consulting, investment banking, or private equity, and then they list companies in each of those domains. The GRE score is a 319, the GPA a 3.06. They did graduate from one of the top service academies. They've been working for 5 years. They're located in San Diego, but they would like to land in the north or southeast coming up at post-MBA. They know that their GPA/GRE kind of tandem there is a low point in their application, and they're wondering if they should take the GRE again or maybe take the executive assessment, which they've been scoring well on in practice tests. So I'll kind of turn it over to you because I know you had some back and forth with this candidate and that they also went into detail on sort of their, some of their professional accomplishments, which were, pretty stunning to see those listed in terms of the types of military operations and things they've been active with. But what do you make of this? Because these numbers are low, although the school list there's a wide range, but still, what's your take on this candidate?
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, I would agree the numbers are the concern here. And I say that because, I think the candidate has had some terrific experience. As well as being involved in sort of extracurricular activities and so on and so forth. So that side of the profile is likely outstanding, right? So where is the weak point? It's going to be the numbers, 319 GRE, 306 GPA. What's the issue here? It's going to be these numbers that's going to define which program they get into, because if they can raise that bar a little bit, and it's complemented by outstanding professional experience, then they're going to have access to better schools. There's just no doubt in my mind about that. It's very clear that if they retake the GRE, bolster that score a little bit, do MBA Math or HBS Core or whatever it is, just really focus hard on improving that side of the profile. That's really, really important. The other side that needs to be addressed and to be thought through is having focused goals. So not sort of, I might go into investment banking or consulting, but really think through which pathway makes most sense. And I would imagine it's consulting, because that's a very typical path coming out of the MBA. So look at that short term. And then in the long term, I'm not sure I'd talk about politics, not because politics is such a sensitive topic, but I would be looking more at the professional progress in terms of going to, COO type role, CEO or whatever it is type role in an industry about which they can be passionate. And then, politics might be a very long-term prospect. That's perfectly fine. But I would be more focused on sort of corporate and focus goals. If they really committed to politics in the shorter term, then they've really got to justify why the MBA versus maybe an MPA or whatever the other options are in terms of master's programs that would be better aligned with a political career. So the reason why I chose this candidate, and I know they actually posted to apply a little while ago, and I neglected to select them, was because they have such a fantastic profile that if they can affect these other aspects, I think they should be applying to the top schools. The very top schools. They shouldn't be sort of spreading their prospects so wide. Hence, you said they're looking at 13 schools right now. This is an M7 candidate if they can really sort of bolster their academic profile a little bit, Graham.
Yeah. So when I first saw this, I was like, okay, military candidate with a really stellar background. We don't have to get into the details, but they've been involved in some pretty impressive operations in the field. I mean, they clearly have all you would want on the work experience side and leadership that, a lot of these top schools really enjoy finding candidates who have this, right? But the numbers, they make you sort of turn your head. I do think that the GPA, I feel like, okay, it's just above a 3. It's certainly below average, but it's a service academy. We know there's limited grade inflation at the service academies. They could probably write an optional essay explaining, maybe what it was that sort of set them back. It sounded like they, had to take a bunch of quantitative stuff that was a struggle for them at the time. Although, they have to be careful, right? Because business school is fairly quantitative as well. So, but in any event, I could live with the GPA, but the GRE score at 319 concerns me. And I was going to say to you, if this person had a 330 or even a 325, I feel like this would be, you'd be like, okay, M7, they're going to write their ticket into a top, program.
Yeah.
Because we know military candidates are, schools like them, and, they have a lot of leadership, and there's all kinds of great experiences they can bring to the classroom. I don't like the sort of, the wishy-washy kind of career plan. Like, they don't seem to know whether they want to do consulting or banking. They got to figure that out, as you said. I'm not as worried about the politics thing. Like they mentioned, is that like a third rail? Don't go anywhere near it. I don't mind if they say that in the long run they have some political aspirations. In fact, we've seen a number of MBAs, who go into politics. It's more common now than it used to be many years ago. But I agree with you, though, that they probably need kind of, I'm going to do consulting. I then want to be a COO or, do some kind of C-suite related work. And then eventually I would like to get into politics. So I think it has to be more of a, like you were saying, a very long range kind of plan.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I were this person, I did want to ask you, because they're saying, oh, I don't know if I can get better on the GRE, but I'm doing really well on executive assessment practice tests. But what's your take there? Because I don't think they should take the EA, given that they want to have a range of schools to apply to. But I feel like you probably would agree with that.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the EA period if you can do well on any of the other tests, because I do think it limits your options. There are some schools that accept it. The order of priority in terms of test taking should be GMAT, GRE, and executive assessment. Mm-hmm. And GMAT, GRE might be pretty close at this point.
Yeah.
But a gap to executive assessment, and certainly test waiver is the fourth in that list of priority.
Yeah. What I would say is this person's not going to apply until the fall, right? So they have time. Right. I mean, and so I would say do whatever it takes. Hire a tutor, whatever you need to do to boost your test score. And I don't know. I mean, they've been taking the GRE. Sometimes change the scenery, like work on the GMAT, whatever they need to do, get a score that puts them more in play, because it's going to be, I just feel like there's a missed opportunity here with respect to the M7 type schools if they don't at least get, that score up, because you can't, it's just hard to go in with both a low GPA and a low GMAT or GRE. So, yeah.
That's my point. And the fact is, this is probably an outstanding candidate. So sort it out and make yourself, a profile that a top school will be seeking.
Yeah. Yes. Agreed. So I want to thank that person for posting and also for their service. I encourage everyone to read the profile on the site. It's pretty impressive. So good luck. They probably didn't want to hear this advice about the test, but it is what it is. We're trying to help you get into the best school possible. So let's move on though and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 2. So this is another ApplyWire entry, and this person is going to apply next fall to start in 23, although they're also thinking they might even wait another year, depending. They've got 4 schools on their target list, and those schools are Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, and Kellogg. They have been working in a family business, so kind of an entrepreneurial role, and they want to stay in that role kind of post-MBA. GMAT score is 760, GPA 3.51. They've only got, to this point, 2 years of experience, I guess, or they would have 3 at matriculation, apparently. So maybe they actually have 1 now, and it'll be 3 by the time they would matriculate in the fall of 23. They are located in India and intend to return to India afterwards. And I'll let you kind of speak to their background and some of the questions that they've posed to us, because they actually asked us a series of very direct kind of questions about their candidacy. But I did want to mention that they wrote that they have to begin by saying that I really love your podcast. Found it on Google about 2 weeks ago and have been listening to it every time I get the chance. I would really love to be featured on the podcast. So there you go. So here they are. Alex, what do you make of this candidate? Because they have a number of sort of dilemmas and, they're kind of younger, working in a family business, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of potential upside with this candidate, I think. They're obviously young, early in their career trajectory, but there's lots of sort of signals that point towards a terrific upside. 760 on the GMAT, so please don't spend any energy retaking that. That's already in the sort of stratosphere.
Yeah.
They're concerned, how will their school be sort of evaluated relative to other schools in India and so on and so forth. That's out of the candidate's control, so there's not really much point in worrying about that. But I would imagine that the AdCom in this day and age are pretty conversant of the different programs and so on and so forth. But the point is, I don't think that's something that needs to, someone needs to worry about. Now, they're early in their career, so they're planning to apply maybe next season or the season after, so that's very good. In terms of that question specifically, there's no harm in applying a little earlier applying to, only the sort of top schools that you would absolutely love to attend. If they're not admitted, they can reapply, right? And reapplicant admit rates generally are higher as someone continues to progress in their career, and for other reasons, there's an upward trend in their story and so on and so forth. So, I think they should take a chance, apply next season, and see where the chips fall. They're working in a family business. It's an early stage startup. They've done very well. They're the CMO and, working with their mother and so forth. They have, I think the budgets are pretty good, their revenue and so forth. So it seems like a legitimate business that they've undertaken. They've done very well. One of their questions is, should they switch into a sort of a larger environment before they go off to business school? And my answer to that is, don't do it for the sakes of your application. If they genuinely believe a different experience would be a better growth experience for them, and it makes sense for them their family business that they can leave and not jeopardize that, it might make sense. But if they're learning and growing and thriving and doing lots of interesting things in their small family business, I think that's a great environment to continue to grow and develop and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't switch for any other reason than how will it enable their own particular personal sort of growth, professional growth and so forth. So that was a question. Now, challenges that they'll face is going to be seeking recommenders, right?
Right.
So, how do they go about that? They're going to need to probably ratchet up their extracurricular activity and take on some leadership in that domain about something about which they're passionate. So don't just do it for the sake of doing it, but do it all in because it's something about which they're passionate, so that they can potentially work with someone that's going to be willing to write one of those recommendations for them, so see them outside of their sort of family work environment. Then maybe it's an accountant or a service provider, but that's always going to be challenging if they need to get 2 recommendations. Some schools it might only be 1, but most schools still be 2. A lot of upside here, Graham.
Yeah.
Lots of potential. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think when it comes to the recommendation, they seem to, they're really worried about, getting that from within the family business. And I agree. And I think we've said it before on the show, but you got to go outside. And that doesn't mean it has to be from an extracurricular. It could literally be from, the lawyer for your firm or the accountant or someone that, you've worked to develop. They mentioned they have all these partnerships across India with where they're kind of, I guess, delivering whatever it is that they're selling, et cetera. So finding someone who at least isn't blood related and can speak to, their, ideally someone who's older, which shouldn't be hard. This is a young candidate, right? But just finding someone who, at least in theory, could be in a bit more of a mentor kind of role and could weigh in. And I know it's going to be challenging, but they're going to have to figure out a way. Obviously, you cannot submit a letter from someone that's a blood relation. That I presume is should be obvious, but so that's one challenge. I agree with you. They had this whole thing where they're asking us, should I retake the test and try to get a 780 or a 790 because this is an Indian male? But I think 760 is great, as you said. So don't even worry about that. They went to a liberal arts college in India, which is a kind of unknown college apparently, or lesser known, even though it was set up by some American, colleges that wanted to, or some graduates from American colleges that wanted to have a liberal arts kind of opportunity in India. So, but as you said, there's not a lot they can do about the fact that it's lesser known. It's not one of the IITs, obviously. And so, but I feel like, admissions officers, as you say, it's their job to look into this stuff. So that'll happen. I just feel like they should shoot for the moon, apply this year and see, this fall and see what happens. And what did you think? They had this whole comment on school selection. They have 4 schools on the list, and somebody was really helpful and said, gee, given that you want to work in kind of, what is it, luxury goods and retail and that kind of stuff, which I believe is the domain of the current business, why wouldn't you look at IESE, which is really known for that, or even NYU Stern, which has even a special 1-year MBA in kind of fashion and things, and a good reputation overall. And this person said, well, I don't know if I want to be in Europe. I don't know if I need to go to a school where the brand is well known in India. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that. Like, should they be expanding the net, or you think just go with the schools on the list for this first round here?
Either which way, they need to know the schools better. And I try to make that point a little bit. So not targeting schools simply because they're the top schools, right? So I think they had Harvard, Stanford, whatever, Kellogg. But I mean, they're very good schools, but they've clearly got to get under the hood and look at their particular offerings, the sort of learning culture, the environment, and really understand their fit to these individual programs. And as that commenter suggested, I thought actually that their input was outstanding in terms of the advice they gave, in terms of why getting the MBA for sort of personal development and growth and passion for the industry, rather than it's because that's my obligation, what I got to do for the family business. So there was some really good interaction there.
Yeah.
But also this school choice, very, very important, because the obvious choices are, as they mentioned, and you sort of affirmed, there are programs in Europe that focus on luxury brands more so than perhaps the US, and then in the US, Stern would be a good, Stern has a particular track for this. So they've got to do a lot more research on these programs.
Yeah, agreed. And I want to give a shout out. That's a relatively new poster who gave that advice, and their handle is Mnemonic the Hedgehog. So I want to just give them a shout out.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, well, I guess there's Sonic the Hedgehog, which is a children's or, kind of a video game or cartoon. But yeah, so it's a little bit of a play on words. But I think, they've been providing some great advice, as have many members of the community, which we love to see.
Yeah.
So I want to thank that person, the original poster, for putting that up there. They have some time to figure all this out, but I agree. I think we've given them some.
I'm going to add one more point, Graham.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
This is a little touchy, but hopefully it's received in the right way. But this poster does come across as being young, right?
Yeah.
Not just because they have 2 years of experience, but professional maturity is something that will be sort of judged also in the application process. So making sure that they come across as sort of professionally mature, even with the lesser number of years. And the only reason why I suggest this is in their most recent sort of comments, sort of outlining their impact at work, which is very, very good. Some of it is quite tactical in nature. And I just want to caution them that might sort of come across, it might label them as being a little bit less than quite ready yet for this experience at the very top schools.
Right.
Now, if this person was targeting, let's say, top 16, 20 programs with the numbers they have and this sort of short experience, they're going to be, they apply early, obviously, because of that sort of India male category. Yeah, they're going to be provided that easy access. But when they're targeting the very, very best programs, all these little things make an impact.
Agreed. Yeah. So I want to thank them for sharing their profile. Obviously, they have time and they can share with us further comments on that post and, what they think about what we had to say on the show today. But yeah, interesting stuff. And, still time to get that candidacy kind of ready.
Yeah. And best of luck to them.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Absolutely. So let's move on and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 3. So our final entry candidate for the week is a Decision Wire post, and this is someone who applied to Columbia, Tuck, Harvard, MIT, and Yale, and they ended up getting in everywhere except Harvard, and they actually got some money, right? So Columbia gave them a $160,000 scholarship, Tuck gave them the same. MIT initially offered them $130,000, but then ended up bumping theirs up to $160,000 to match the offer that the candidate had received from other schools. And Yale also gave this person $160,000. So they've got plenty of money on the table, and they're going to be starting school this fall. They don't know which one they want to pick. We'll get into where they want to go. But the debate for them has been between MIT and Columbia. They want to work in asset management. ideally, and they basically, the numbers were a 750 and a 3.9 GPA, so pretty impressive stuff. They've been working and living in Japan, although they are an American citizen, as we learned from the comments that took place after in the conversation. And basically, they just said that Sloan feels like a better fit for them, but that people keep telling them that CBS is better for asset management, which is what they want to do post-MBA. And so they're wondering, how true is that? And they actually mentioned, the employment reports aren't substantially different. And I don't know if how deeply they delved into that. I'm presuming they did their homework, but so they're wondering, what they should do. And obviously, as the conversation went on the entry, I think they reached a decision, but I wanted to just hear, what's your point of view on this? Because it's an interesting dilemma, Sloan versus Columbia.
Yeah, I mean, two outstanding programs, and this does seem like an outstanding candidate. So I wonder why they blanked out a little bit at the very, very top.
Yeah.
But obviously they got a lot of money at the very next best, the likes of Sloan and Columbia and so forth. So
sure.
This is what we call the first world champagne problem or something, I suppose.
Yeah.
And they actually renegotiated some scholarship to bump up their offer at Sloan, so that was pretty slick on their part.
Yeah.
I mean, the numbers don't lie, right? Asset management, you might even tilt it in favor of Columbia. I think that's what our data would suggest, right, Graham? And I think Columbia does have the reputation for that. But at the end of the day, with the quality of this candidate, with the resources that Sloan has, the resources that Columbia has, I think they are in great shape to pursue their opportunity at either of the schools. So fit, which seems to be something that was clearly very important for this candidate, and their sense that Sloan was the better fit. Sort of help swing into Sloan's favor, and actually the community that contributed seemed to favor Sloan in this case, Graham. So I thought it was quite an interesting debate. I didn't really have a lot of great insight to add, other than the fact that this is a high-profile candidate, and it's great to see the opportunities that they're having. Going to business school.
It is impressive. I mean, these offers are pretty nuts in terms of the scholarship dollars too.
Yeah.
I will say, in that piece that we mentioned earlier in this podcast, the piece where we broke down finance placements by subcategory, CBS has about 10% of their graduating class going into investment management or asset management. And so that's the number one school for that in terms of the percentages, right? And then Sloan is more at around 4.3%. So there is a difference. With that said, this person has worked in more of an operational role within the kind of hedge fund asset management domain. So they may have some connections. And, the conversation that took place on the website where people were weighing in pointed out that there are a lot of good funds and firms in the Boston area that Sloan has some ties to. And they also even got into some debate about the style of investment, asset management, whether you're kind of a quant person or more of a fundamental. Like there's just a whole bunch of different conversations that started to take place. And I will say, I'm a big believer in fit. And so, it's 2 years of your life you're going to spend somewhere. And so you got to go where you think you're going to be happy. And as you said, this is a stellar candidate with a lot of opportunities. And I think they're going to land the job they want post MBA regardless. So if they want to go to Sloan, which it seems like that's the decision that they've taken here, then, hats off to them. And I'm sure they're going to do really well. But it was just an interesting debate given Columbia's strength in this specific domain. But yeah, it is what it is. And they have the right, they just have this feeling for Sloan. So that's where they're going to go.
Yeah. Best of luck to them. Fantastic.
Yeah. So we've done it again. 3 candidates, hopefully a handful of admissions lessons imparted along the way. I want to thank you, Alex, for picking these out. And we'll be back in 1 week's time to do it all over again with a new set of candidates. So yeah, thanks, Alex. Always a pleasure.
Very good. Stay safe, everyone. Take care.